Looking back through the history of the world's great civilizations, we can't help but mention the culture of ancient Egypt. The image of vast golden deserts, towering pyramids, and mysterious tombs has been deeply imprinted in most people's minds whenever Egypt is mentioned. Of course, there are many fascinating things hidden beneath the golden sands of Egyptian civilization. The daily life of ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptian civilization originated from the Nile Delta. The vast Nile River in northeastern Africa forms a delta triangle and is the lifeblood of all Egypt. From this fertile yet isolated land in the middle of the desert, the Egyptians began to plow, plant rice, and develop agriculture. Because the silt and soil around the Nile River are especially black, unlike many later cultures, the Egyptians highly valued the color black and considered it the foundational life. In contrast, the red land, or the endless Sahara Desert surrounding them, was home to strange sandstorms. Because of this, the Egyptians associated the color red with bad luck. Every year, from June to September, the Nile floods, bringing silt that allows the Egyptians to farm. They mainly grew crops like barley, wheat, dates, lotus, and papyrus. At the same time, the Nile Delta was also home to a wide variety of creatures important to Egyptian beliefs, such as falcons, cattle, crocodiles, leopards, and many other animals. As a result, the Egyptians gradually developed a culture that valued and worshipped animals, especially creatures like cattle and falcons. It was a land heavily dependent on agriculture. Most Egyptians were farmers, some were craftsmen, and a small number were slaves. At a higher social level were the kings, known as pharaohs, which means great house, as well as priests and nobles. Throughout the year, Egyptians farmed and raised livestock. They lived in houses made of mud bricks, wore light linen clothing, and enjoyed meals that included bread, beer, vegetables, and fruit. The Egyptian people practiced strict burial customs for the dead. Over time, burial became one of their most highly developed traditions. Egyptian culture. In ancient times, scenes of daily life and production were recorded on walls, temples, and tombs. Paintings were also used for religious and political purposes. For the Egyptians, the art of painting was a versatile cultural feature that was extremely important to their lives. For thousands of years, they developed a set of strict rules with their own unique characteristics, which helped them avoid foreign cultural influences and complete assimilation. Unlike the paintings of China or Greece, Egyptian culture emphasized simple lines and forms, along with orderly and balanced compositions. Egyptian writing and drawings were often inscribed on tombs, walls, temples, coffins, and even statues. In construction, stone was the material most frequently used for building and carving artworks. However, the Egyptians still placed importance on using wood in the process of making coffins. To create vibrant paintings, they could also use iron ore, copper ore, and limestone. In addition to paintings, people could also craft small statues and books about death, items they believed would protect them after they passed away. Over time, the Egyptians were still influenced to some extent by other civilizations. After the Hyksos invasion, the Egyptians began to be influenced by Minoan culture as well as Greek culture during the Ptolemaic period, or in a more unique case, the culture under King Akhenaten. Akhenaten's culture is still referred to as Amarna art. In contrast to traditional paintings that exaggerated the achievements and appearance of the kings, Amarna art depicted the true appearance of the reigning king Akhenaten and included scenes of daily life in temples instead of only in tombs as before. Egyptian writing was created in the 4th millennium BC, making it one of the oldest writing systems in the world. According to mythology, the Egyptians were taught writing by the god Thoth, the deity of wisdom. Hieroglyphs were initially the most common script. However, contrary to what many people think, the Egyptians didn't just have hieroglyphs, they also developed phonetic scripts as well as ideograms. Even so, hieroglyphs continued to be highly valued and were used alongside phonetic scripts. After the fall of ancient Egypt under Roman rule, it wasn't until 1799 that Thomas Young, a British physician, was able to figure out how to decipher Egyptian script. By 1822, the French finally discovered the perfect way to decode ancient Egyptian writing. Thanks to this, research on ancient Egypt over the past hundreds of years finally made a significant breakthrough. Among ancient scripts, the most important were religious texts, which were carved into the corridors of pyramids to record rituals and methods to ensure a prosperous life after death. Not only in art, but perhaps science was the greatest achievement of the Nile civilization. The Egyptians were not only the first people to create a calendar, but they also knew about pi and many other fundamental mathematical concepts. Egyptian astronomy was also highly developed, along with medicine. Trade was also connected throughout the years. They were even able to build the largest lighthouse of that time, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This lighthouse used the most advanced technology of its era, helping to illuminate and guide ships in the area. Unfortunately, later wars also destroyed this lighthouse. Mythology, religion. In Egypt, the pharaohs were not only rulers but also protectors, embodiments of the gods on earth, and held supreme power. Similar to many later polytheistic religions, the Egyptians believed that gods were not always benevolent and needed to be worshipped and prayed to. The domains of the gods were sealed off from the outside world, and only priests were allowed to communicate with the deities inside the temples. 3 representative pantheons of the ancient Egyptian people. Egyptian religion was very ancient and rich, made up of many local pantheons of deities. There are many overlapping and intertwined myths, among which 3 major pantheons stand out: the sun god Ra, the Horus pantheon, and the Osiris pantheon. For the Egyptians, the sun was the source of fire and the source of life for all things. Therefore, in the sun god Ra pantheon, the sun god not only holds the highest position, but is also considered the ancestor of the great family of gods here. As for the Osiris pantheon, Osiris is often worshipped and regarded as a deity who rules over the underworld. Egyptian mythology doesn't clearly state the origins of Osiris. However, this pantheon later merged with both the Horus and Ra pantheons, creating a certain and lasting influence. The influence between Ra and Osiris can be seen as an important religious struggle between the priests of Ra and the priests of Osiris over many centuries. And since Ra was originally a god from Western Asia, the native inhabitants leaned toward Osiris. Over time, Osiris gradually overshadowed even Ra himself. As for Horus, at first he was simply an ancient god representing kingship and the sky, with one eye symbolizing the sun and the other representing the moon. In the early days, there was the elder Horus, the son of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. He married the hippopotamus goddess Renutet and fathered a son, the younger Horus, also known as Harpocrates, who represented the rays of the morning sun. After a period of interaction and assimilation with other pantheons, Horus became the representative of the falcon-headed gods. On one hand, he became Horus, the son of Osiris. On the other, he merged with the sun god Ra to form Ra-Harakti. Both Ra and Horus were recognized as the great sun that brings life. While Ra was the king of the gods and the supreme sun, Horus was the god of war, the commander of the army. The images of elder Horus and younger Horus also changed over time. In the most famous story, elder Horus is the brother of Osiris, Set, and Isis. When Set rebelled and killed his brother, the child of Osiris and Isis, young Horus rose up and killed Set. A less mentioned version is that Ra gave birth to the twins Osiris and Horus, and when Set rebelled and killed Osiris, Horus killed him to avenge his brother. One notable point is that Egyptian mythology also places a strong emphasis on many cycles related to death and rebirth. Therefore, quite a few readers also argue that the younger Horus later on is actually the reborn elder Horus. Some other important gods. Besides the trio of Ra, Osiris, and Horus, there are many other prominent gods in Egyptian culture, such as Set, who is one of the most famous figures in Egyptian mythology. The image of Set is associated with cruelty and desert storms. Along with that is the story of him usurping the throne from his brother Osiris and sister Isis, only to be overthrown by the war god Horus. However, his original image was not like that at all. Set was remembered as a friend of the god. Grown-up Horus and Set fought each other, and the two were divided into the god of the daytime sky and the god of the nighttime sky. Set was also the principal deity of Ra and the protector of the sun against chaos. After many millennia, especially following the Hyksos invasion of Egypt, Set gradually became seen as an evil god and a god of chaos because the Hyksos people also worship Set. What's even more interesting is that while Egyptian gods usually have heads based on real animals, Set's head is based on the Set animal itself, a creature that doesn't exist in reality. Even though no one knows why the Egyptians came up with the Set animal, it is remembered as a heretical figure, representing the desert regions in opposition to civilization. Isis, the goddess of magic, healing, and motherhood. In the story of Horus avenging Set for killing Osiris, she plays a crucial role in ensuring that Horus becomes king. Another famous story about Isis is the tale of how she discovered the true name of the god Ra. By poisoning Ra and forcing him to reveal his true name to her, Ra was compelled to give up his throne to Osiris. Because of this, Isis is also known as the one who knows all the names. Anubis is the jackal-headed god who guides the dead. According to legend, Anubis is often considered the son of Set, but some stories suggest that Osiris cuckolded Set to father Anubis. Earlier versions mention that Anubis is the son of Ra. Thoth is a god who was born at the same time as Ra. As the god of intellect, Thoth represents the wisdom of the sun god Ra, and is also the god of the moon. Thoth's most important role is recording the judgments made during the weighing of the dead. Later on, Thoth was also mentioned as the founder of astronomy, mathematics, language, as well as the arts of reading and writing. The Ogdoad are 8 primordial gods worshipped in the city of Hermopolis. This pantheon consists of 4 gods representing fundamental concepts, along with 4 gods representing opposing concepts, similar to the yin and yang concept in Chinese civilization. The Ogdoad consists of Hethu and Hauhet, representing time and space, Nenu and Nunet, representing order and chaos, Kekis and Kalkit, representing light and darkness, and Amun and Amunet, representing creation and destruction. Amun was originally a primordial god in the group of 8 who must be mentioned by name. Over time, the 8 gods of the Ogdoad gradually faded into obscurity under the name of Amun and other gods such as Ra, Osiris, or Set. During the 12th dynasty, Amun gradually became a famous god and was widely worshipped in the city of Thebes. Unlike Osiris, who is depicted as the son of Ra, Amun was assimilated with Ra himself to become Amun-Ra, a god who was widely worshipped in major cities and regions such as Thebes and Memphis. Khnum, a god with the head of a ram, represented the power of creation and was also the one who created the gods and molded human beings. The image of Khnum was identified with both the creator god, and he was also considered the god of the Nile, bringing vitality and peace to the people of Egypt. Sekhmet, the goddess with the head of a lioness, was the embodiment of the sun's rays and intense heat, representing destruction. She was later identified with Hathor, the goddess who protected love, often depicted as a deity with the head of a cow. Bastet is the goddess of cats. Many researchers believe that her origins come from the worship of cats. She is also associated with the moon, and in contrast to Sekhmet's fierce nature, Bastet is much gentler. She herself, together with Ra, also merged with Sekhmet to form the figure of Sekhmet Bastet Ra, a deity with the body of a woman, the head of a man, and 2 falcon heads along with wings grown from the arms. Ptah, one of the principal gods in Memphis, is also remembered as the embodiment of the dawn light. Ptah was worshipped very early on, dating back to the 2nd dynasty. For the Egyptian people, Ptah was not only the patron of craftsmanship, but also the creator god, the one who made the boats that allowed the dead to journey to the afterlife. Ptah also had another form known as Ptah Seker. In this form, he represents the primordial power of chaos and the darkness of night. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of the Nile, represents water and fertility, as well as being the protector of the army. He often accompanies the god Ra. Some sources even note that Sobek is the son of the god Set. Ape is the embodiment of chaos, darkness, storms, and earthquakes. Ape is often depicted as a serpent lurking deep in the underworld, attacking Ra as he journeys to bring sunlight. The Egyptians explained solar eclipses as the work of Apep. To them, when the sun is obscured, it means Ape is trying to devour the god Ra alive. In some versions, Apep is even described as Ra's twin brother. Setna is a legendary prince based on Khaimwaset, a real historical figure and the son of Ramesses the Great. Legend has it that Setna was a highly talented scribe and a remarkably wise prince. However, Setna and his wife, Mytuosket, did not have any children. One dark night, Setna's wife prayed to the god Ta, and eventually they had a child named Osiris. Osiris grew up incredibly fast and became a talented individual, skilled in magic, even recognized as the wisest and most extraordinary magician among all magicians. He and his father once embarked on a journey to the underworld of Osiris. There, he showed his father that no matter how wealthy a person is, after death, the gods will judge only based on a person's virtue. Over time, it was gradually revealed that he was a powerful magician who had been reincarnated to protect Egypt from foreign forces. But right after completing the mission of defeating the enemy, Osiris was also forced to vanish in the sacred flames. Setna and Mytuosket's hearts ached endlessly over the loss of their child. But fortunately, they eventually had another child to carry on the family line. Aten was originally the disk of the sun. Aten became an important deity during the reign of Akhenaten. With Aten being worshipped in daily life, Aten represented both the sun and the solar disk and was also considered the source of all life. The intersection between Egypt and Greece? Under the Greek origin Ptolemaic dynasty, the Egyptian people transitioned to a new form of religion. The rulers of Egypt were originally of Greek descent, and they saw the Egyptian gods as sharing the same essence as the Greek gods, just expressed from a completely different perspective. Therefore, gods like Aten were assimilated with Zeus, Hathor with Aphrodite, Osiris with Pluto, Set with Typhon, Bastet with Artemis, Ptah with Hephaestus, and Horus with Apollo. A notable god during this period was also Serapis, a fusion of Osiris and Apis, two original Egyptian gods who were considered similar to Amun. At first, Serapis was simply a minor village deity, but under King Ptolemy I, he was completely elevated and became a powerful god, blending aspects of Hades and Pluto, Dionysus, and Osiris. Serapis is remembered as a god symbolizing prosperity and as the ruler of the underworld. Alongside Serapis, there was also Zeus Ammon, a fusion of Zeus and Ammon. This figure has the face of Zeus, but with two horns on either side of his head, symbolizing power. Another god, Horus, was known as Harpocrates, and is remembered as a child deity sitting on a lotus blossom. The image of Harpocrates with his mother, the goddess Isis, is believed to have inspired the depiction of Jesus Christ with the Virgin Mary. Pyramids and religious architectural structures. It would truly be an omission to talk about Egypt without mentioning the pyramids, as these are the most important architectural works of Egypt and the pride of the ancient Egyptians. At first, the Egyptians did not intend to build pyramids in the shape of triangles. After a period of consolidating power and unifying the central government, the pyramid was first constructed during the reign of Djoser, the founding pharaoh of the Third Dynasty. King Djoser's pyramid at that time was a step pyramid made up of 7 distinct layers. The later pharaohs of the Third Dynasty continued to build more pyramids and tombs. But it wasn't until the reign of the first pharaoh of the Fourth Dynasty, Sneferu, that pyramid construction reached a whole new level. Instead of steps, this time Sneferu wanted a pyramid with smooth sides. After several attempts and failures, he finally managed to build the Red Pyramid at Dashur. Sneferu's descendants, such as Khufu and others, continued to build smooth-sided pyramids, made from white limestone and even topped with gold. That's how the famous Giza Pyramid Complex came into existence. The pyramids were built with extremely advanced engineering for their time. Even though the Egyptians didn't know about adhesives, they were still able to fit massive stone blocks together so tightly that they didn't need mortar or any other binding materials. One of the many reasons why the pyramids have lasted so long is that, unlike square-shaped buildings, many scholars believe the apexes of the pyramids were built at nearly 52 degrees. Why 52 degrees? Because if you let the wind blow a speck of dust, it will form a pile of dust at exactly 52 degrees, which is also known as the angle of nature. That's why this is often considered one of the many reasons the pyramids have been able to endure for so long. Another important factor is that building with a narrower incline also makes it easier to stack the stones in horizontal rows. Of course, we can't forget the fact that the ancient Egyptian government did an excellent job managing its people, as they were able to mobilize thousands to transport materials, train stone carvers and other builders, and also receive significant contributions from architects and intellectuals. However, it's unfortunate that not many ancient documents describing the construction methods have survived. The first pyramid was built during the 3rd dynasty, under the reign of Imhotep, a famous high official. Over time, more new pyramids were built. Among them, the Pyramid of King Cheops stands out as one of the most magnificent pyramids ever built. It took 30 years to build, and this pyramid reached a height of 146 meters, but over time, erosion reduced it to 138 meters. The Egyptians believed that after death, a person still had to work. That's why building pyramids was one of the ways for the Egyptian king, after being reborn, to escape hardship. Therefore, the pyramid was not just a tomb for the king to rest in, but its steps also served to help the king ascend to the heavens. Inside the pyramid, many spells were also inscribed on the coffin and other items for the king to use in the afterlife, as well as offering texts and hymns. The architectural blocks of the pyramids in particular, and Egyptian architecture in general, were used for both spiritual and commemorative purposes, while also serving a political purpose by demonstrating the immense power of the dynasties. Over time, the pyramids gradually fell into decline and were eventually replaced by tombs carved deep into the rock. One of the main reasons the Egyptians abandoned the pyramids was because they were very easy to plunder during times of turmoil. However, even when the Egyptian kings moved to build their tombs in safer locations, the risk of being looted remained very high. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Western archaeologists were lucky to find a few tombs that remained intact. The most notable example is the tomb of Tutankhamun, which was discovered in the early 1920s. This also led to some rumors that the tombs of the Egyptian kings were cursed, as those who participated all died in extremely mysterious ways. During Howard Carter's initial expedition, many people such as Lord Carnarvon, a British nobleman who funded the expedition, George J. Gould, an American sponsor, as well as Arthur Crutzen and Donna Mace archaeologists and Carter's associates, all died under mysterious circumstances. Sir Bruce Ingram, a friend of Carter, also received a gift made from a mummified hand with the inscription, "Cursed be those who dare disturb my body. You'll suffer torment from fire, water, and disease." After that event, Ingram's house was burned down, and after it was rebuilt, a flood swept it away. 16 years after the discovery of the tomb, Carter also passed away, and at that point, many people rumored that Carter was cursed just like the others. Of course, many people have tried to explain why the archaeologists died. To this day, the most reasonable explanation is still that they died from the toxic spores of Aspergillus flavus fungus. Even so, this remains a highly controversial topic, and there is still no definitive answer. The Howard Carter case also had similar incidents, but they were not made public. After the tomb of Pharaoh Seti I was discovered in 1817, Giovanni Battista Belzoni, the Italian explorer who uncovered the tomb, suddenly died in 1823, just 6 years after the discovery. He called himself the Great Benzoni. When entering the tomb, Benzoni not only seriously damaged the reliefs, but also destroyed the overall structure of the entire tomb. Unlike Carter, we know that Benzoni contracted dysentery while traveling around West Africa. Besides the pyramids, the Sphinx is also a symbol of ancient Egypt. In fact, the Egyptian Sphinx was never actually called Sphinx as we do today. That name comes from the Sphinx in Greek mythology. Of course, the two Sphinxes have no relation to each other. To this day, no one understands why the Sphinx was created, or the hidden meaning behind this figure. Many people still debate why the Sphinx was built, as well as why the Sphinx's face is missing its nose. There was a period when it was said that during his campaign to conquer Egypt, Napoleon Bonaparte fired cannons at the Sphinx's nose. But this isn't accurate because we all know that the Sphinx lost its nose many centuries before that. As for the homes in Egyptian residential areas, most people lived in houses made of mud. Meanwhile, people of higher social classes lived in houses with more spacious and complex architecture. Paintings and murals were carved on the walls, depicting many scenes of people, animals, and deities. Unlike Western civilizations, which believed the body consisted of only two parts, mind and body, or soul and body, the Egyptian civilization imagined the body as having many soul parts, along with one physical body. The body was understood to be the dwelling place for the soul. Therefore, once the body died, it needed to be preserved so that it would not decay. The soul consisted of the part, the shadow, the ba, the ka, and the sekhem, which was the source of life. The brain is usually considered the place that holds thoughts and emotions. However, for the Egyptians, that belonged to the heart. A heart was understood as the soul. Therefore, the Egyptians believed that after death, the heart would be weighed against a feather, which symbolized justice, to determine whether that person was worthy of entering the afterlife, known as duat. If they were not worthy, they would be devoured by the goddess Ammon. Influenced by these spiritual beliefs, the Egyptians perfected an elaborate mummification system to prepare the dead for continued existence in the afterlife. First, the Egyptians would soak the body in salt and other desiccants for several weeks to dry it out. After that, the embalmers would remove all the internal organs as well as the brain. The internal organs would be placed in 4 jars called canopic jars, while the brain would be discarded. After washing the body with fragrant water, they would add aromatic substances for disinfection and then sew it back up. The body would then be wrapped in a cloth and placed in a coffin, with a mask made of bronze or gold. On the lid of the coffin, an image of the deceased would be engraved so that the soul could easily find its body later. Finally, the mummy would be buried in various ways according to the social status of the deceased. Individuals from lower classes would only be mummified in a simple manner and placed in a makeshift tomb or at the edge of a larger tomb. People from the upper classes would be buried very carefully in decorated tombs, although these might not necessarily be stone coffins. Those of the highest ranks, such as pharaohs, royalty, or priests, would be buried in multi-layered coffins and stone chambers, often crafted with great care and detail. Perhaps the most important burial ritual was the opening of the mouth ceremony. A priest would touch the mouth of the mummy or the coffin with sacred objects, such as an axe. The hook would perform a symbolic action, as if opening the mouth of the mummy. The ancient Egyptians believed that this act would allow the mummy to breathe and speak in the afterlife. An overview of Egyptian history. Egypt was originally formed from small communities along the Nile River, which provided fertile silt and abundant water, fostering the development of crafts and agricultural regions. These conditions laid the foundation for society to progress to the stage of forming large kingdoms, going through 3 main periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, along with 2 regions, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. The names of these 2 regions were based on the Nile River, which flows from south to north. At first, both Lower and Upper Egypt were 2 separate regions. However, these 2 regions were gradually unified under Pharaoh Narmer, forming Egypt's first dynasty. The capital of Egypt was Memphis, which served as the central hub connecting Upper and Lower Egypt. After the end of the First and Second dynasties, Egypt officially entered the Old Kingdom period. The Old Kingdom period marked Egypt's rise to power and unification, and it was also the era when iconic structures like the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx were created. These monuments symbolize the brilliance of ancient Egyptian civilization. Therefore, this era is also remembered as the Golden Age of the Pyramids. However, as the central government gradually weakened, Egypt once again began to fall into instability. Historians call this period the First Intermediate Period, leading into the Middle Kingdom. The pharaohs focused on building temples, public works, and began to expand their influence. However, this was also a time when the country faced many attacks from foreign peoples that threatened the Egyptians' autonomy. Compared to other periods in Egypt, the Middle Kingdom is perhaps less prominent, especially when compared to the splendor of the Old Kingdom with its pyramids, or the later grandeur of the New Kingdom. However, an important hallmark of this period is the cultural development, with many books, such as the Coffin Texts, the precursor to the Book of the Dead, originating during this era, as well as coffins from this time being designed with remarkable beauty and sophistication. The pharaohs of this period also left behind many significant legacies, such as expanding the territory into Nubia. However, as the central government gradually weakened, they were also forced to limit resources for pyramid construction. As a result, the pyramids built during this period were smaller and more practical to save on costs. In the end, what brought down Egypt during the Middle Kingdom was not the central government at first, but rather natural disasters such as floods and plagues. Egypt entered the Second Intermediate Period and endured a period of foreign rule by the Hyksos for some time. After a long and fierce war during the 17th dynasty, the Egyptians finally regained their independence under the 18th dynasty, officially ushering in the New Kingdom period. The New Kingdom period, which followed the Middle Kingdom, is often considered the peak of Egypt, a golden age of economic, political, and cultural prosperity. Instead of building pyramids, the pharaohs chose to construct their tombs in a vast royal necropolis known as the Valley of the Kings. Many artistic, architectural, and military achievements were also recorded during this period. Although the early pharaohs continuously waged wars and expanded the borders, it was Hatshepsut, a new queen, who consolidated and stabilized the empire that her ancestors had built. She re-established the economy, trade, and diplomatic relations with neighboring powers while also strengthening her own legitimacy through religious activities and the construction of temples. She ruled with strict discipline for 21 years, and after her death in 1458 BC, her nephew Thutmose ascended the throne and spent his reign expanding the territory while also consolidating the lands that his ancestors had reclaimed. During this period, Egypt also had many other notable pharaohs, the most prominent of whom was Amenhotep IV, better known in history as Akhenaten, the second son of the elderly pharaoh Amenhotep III. He was never expected to inherit the throne, but after the death of his older brother, he officially became pharaoh and initiated a religious reform, abolishing Egypt's traditional polytheistic religion. Egypt shifted to worshipping Aten, the disk representing the sun. Amenhotep IV changed his own name to Akhenaten, and with the religious reforms, the empire that Akhenaten's forefathers had built gradually fell into instability and decline. After Akhenaten's death, most of his reforms were undone, and with the death of the last pharaoh of the dynasty, Horemheb, the glorious 18th dynasty officially came to an end. After Horemheb's death, the throne was passed to Ramesses I, a high official of the king. He founded the 19th dynasty and worked hard to consolidate his own power, helping to stabilize Egypt. However, Ramesses I died after only 2 years of rule, leaving his legacy to Seti I, who launched military campaigns in Asia Minor. Egypt reached its peak under the third king of the 19th dynasty, Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great. During the 70-year reign of Ramesses II, Egypt flourished both culturally and economically, expanding its territory into the Levant, which is present-day Asia Minor. From the perspective of the Egyptians at that time, Ramesses II restored the lost glory from the era of Akhenaten. After the reign of Ramesses II, the 19th dynasty gradually fell into decline, paving the way for a new dynasty. Egypt's 20th dynasty began with much promise, especially during the long and successful reign of King Ramesses III. However, during this period, Egypt gradually weakened and increasingly fell under the control of foreign powers. With a series of events known as the Bronze Age collapse, Egypt went from being a prosperous empire to an isolated region. Along with the downfall of the 21st dynasty, Egypt officially lost its autonomy and became a territory of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. After the Persians successfully conquered Egypt, Alexander the Great, an exceptional conqueror from northern Greece, eventually drove the Persians out and took control of this land. After Alexander's death, his general, Ptolemy, seized Egypt and established a foreign dynasty known as the Ptolemaic dynasty. The most notable period during this era was probably the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty under Cleopatra VII. After the Battle of Actium, Egypt finally became a province of the Roman Empire and continued to be ruled by the Eastern Roman Empire after the year 395. In the early Middle Ages, Islam gradually developed and spread to Egypt. Under Arab influence, the entire country gradually shifted from traditional religions to Islam and separated from the Eastern Roman Empire. The city of Cairo flourished, becoming a major economic and cultural center. This was followed by periods under the rule and influence of the Ottoman Empire, as well as French and British colonial powers. By 1952, Egypt gained independence, ending the colonial era and entering a new phase as a republic, opening up new opportunities along with many challenges for the future.